Hello and welcome to Bastionland Broadcasting, where tonight we are looking at... I'm going to come out straight away and say that I lied, because I previously said that we'll be looking at two games that were Mark of the Odd games. And one of these games is technically not a Mark of the Odd game, but I was trying to think of the best way to describe these. And to start to describe them, I'm going to get straight into it. I'm going to be talking about two different games, but before I talk about those games, I'm going to talk about a different game which I have spoken about before. Let's jump straight on. As you can tell, I mean, you can probably tell just from my general demeanour, it's very warm in the UK right now, which is not suitable for the inhabitants, I would say. There's two types of people in the UK. There's people that when it gets sunny, they go and walk around with their shirts off and play football and talk about how great it is. And there's people like me who start pining for winter immediately. And tonight gives me an excuse to close all my blinds, hide in this room. But this is also the hottest room in the house, so it's not good. My point being, my brain is like melted today. So it's going to be a little bit of a chaotic one, but we'll get through it. So the game that started it all. Well, I don't know. The game that started it all. It wasn't the first Into the Odd hack. That would be unfair. But I feel like it was the first of a specific generation of Into the Odd based games that I sort of became aware of. I could well be wrong. But after I released Into the Odd, there were games like Death is the New Pink, Agents of the ODD, sorry. There were a few games that came out sort of in those years and sort of into the bronze. I may be getting my timelines all wrong here, but Cairn by Yokai Gull, who I've spoken about before, and I've read through this book before on a stream. This was the first one that sort of... Well, you know what? I was going to say this is the first one that kind of spun off its own hacks, which I know that you could say that Maze Rats was based on Into the Odd, but Maze Rats kind of grew out of Into the Odd, then became its own thing. Whereas Cairn, I feel, is still in the area of being an Into the Odd hack. I hope Yohai doesn't take too much issue with me saying that. I think that they still feel like they're part of the same family tree. On the same branch of the family tree, whereas Maze Rats is off doing its own thing, pretending not to be related to us anymore. So Ken did a lot of things really well, and another game that did similar sort of things around the same time was Mouse Ritter, which was another very popular Into the Odd based game. And the two games I'm looking at today, it feels very much like they were made as spiritual successors to Cairn and Mouse Ritter, probably almost more than Into the Odd, which is interesting because it's kind of like we're looking now at like grandchildren games of Into the Odd, which is cool. Like I'm not saying I'm some people might feel like, oh, it's drifting away from the thing that I made, but this is what I want. I would love the idea that in 10 years time or 20 years time there's some game that looks completely different to Into the Odd, but you can kind of trace its lineage back and it was back there as an influence. That'd be really cool. But we're not here to talk about Cairn. Everyone knows Cairn, everyone likes Cairn, everybody owns Cairn. If you don't already own Cairn, just go and get it, because like there's no reason to not have it. It's great. So the first of the new games. I should say, for my full transparency, I was given a copy of this when I asked Matthew Morris if I could do a read through of this, and he gladly provided me with a PDF. Runecairn I had actually already bought, so I did not get a free copy of Runecairn, but that's only because I already owned it. But Lilliputian, or Lilliputian, I know it should be Lilliputian because it's Lilliput, but Lilliputian sounds funny to me, so I may alternate between the two. Adventure on the Open Seas. This is brand new. This is the final version as far as I'm aware. But this is brand new. It's been in the works for a while. And the influence of Mouse Ritter is kind of clear in the concept, which is you are from Lilliput. If you're not familiar, the tiny people from Gulliver's Travels. I have not read Gulliver's Travels, so I'm probably going to miss all kinds of sweet references. That's a nice character sheet. I like that you get the option for the A5 or A6 versions. Okay. So, Yokai, we can't escape him. He did also do editing on this, but like I say, this was written by Matthew Morris, who you may know as Manaramp Matt on Twitter. And it's already passed the first test because they've spelled my name correctly, which is like a 50-50 shot to whether people do spell it right. And this isn't a Mark of the Odd game with the shiny new Mark of the Odd logo. So it's good to see that getting some use. It is also for use with Cairn and compatible with Mouse Ritter. So we've got the full trinity here of games from this family. So the structure of this is kind of similar to... I'm going to come back to this one. It's kind of similar to Cairn in that it opens up with all these principles. I still love that they call it a zine. Despite the fact that this is 668 pages. So it's a pretty chunky little zine here. I'm not going to read through all the principles because some of them are very similar to Cairn. And they are good principles. And you know I've said before that I really like having these kind of principles really clearly laid out. And I like having principles for players as well. I think that's a good, useful thing to have. Ambition especially is something that I think, encouraging players to set their own goals. I feel like so much game design is sometimes spent trying to get players motivated to do the fun thing in the game. But most players will want to do that stuff if you give them, if you allow them to. If you say like, well, you can set your ambitions, they might say we want to sail around the world or we want to discover this lost island. You don't need to say, well, if you do this, you can have a cookie. So core rules. I'm not going to do like a full-on comparison to Cairn and sort of look at what's changed. If you're interested in that, I'm sure you can find that information. But I'm more interested in some of the other stuff in here. I love the kind of art style. I'll say straight away. There are a number of different artists in this book, so there is like a wide variety of art. I really like this kind of, I guess, would you call it like woodblock style? But I think really leaning into like the storybook. I'm really starting to like RPG books that don't feel like RPG books. It was one of the things I wanted to do with Into the Odd, the remaster. But Neverland is the other one that really felt like it could just be like a children's book when you're kind of flicking through it. So, you are a Lilliputian explorer. You have the classic attributes. Bit of money, bit of HP. And this is your stuff. So, you know what? We're gonna do it, but I've gone and left my dice downstairs, so I will have to I'll have to get myself a roller, which I can do. So what is our the omen of our birth? We're gonna have to notepad it, I'm afraid. The omen of our birth, summer. Oh, God, I'm not a summer child. I've just been talking about this, but so it means we're hot-headed, bold, and adventurous. We'll roll our ability scores. We probably should have started with that. But let's do our ability scores. So we have a strength of 9. A dex of 10. This is some classic average rolling. If we can get an 11. 15 willpower. 15. So we are a willful summer child. Name. We'll use the sample names. Does anyone like coming up with names that I cannot be doing with it? 19 and 5. We'll go with a male character. Ezekiel is a strong name. Ezekiel Brown. Zeke Brown. I feel like I know somebody called Zeke Brown, but it works here. You also get D6 hit points, of course. Hit protection, sorry, I should say. Hit protection, not hit points. And D6 coins. We have 2 coins. Okay, and then the thing that I really like about Cairn and sort of Mouse Ritter and these kinds of games is that they take what I did. They're really inspired by my great work. What I mean is, in Into the Odd, I put a lot of this random table stuff in the back in the Oddpendium, which I still like, and I still use that, and I still like having it all in one place in some sense, because I feel like it encourages people to kind of dive into it a little bit more. Whereas here they're right there in character creation, which is more of kind of the Maze Rats approach. So I can see the merits of both, but I do quite like it when they just show up here. So let's get some results. We've got some D10s here. What's our I'm just going to roll like 12 D10s. So we are athletic. Our skin is hairy. Our hair, frizzy. Our face is picturesque. So I'm just going to pick out like the highlights. You can see that I'm choosing the bits that I feel best reflect me. Athletic and picturesque. Speech, a droning speech. Clothing is livery, so that we're dressed in livery. Our virtue is hope. Our vice is envy, so we're hopeful but envious. Our reputation is, we have a goofy reputation, and our misfortune is we're being blackmailed. So that's kind of the thing that I would say about this, and I don't mean this as a bad thing. This is very much the scattergun approach of random tables. I would lean towards something being a little bit more focused and just giving you a few things that you have to combine. But here it's like you get the scattergun approach, and you sort of look at it and see what sticks. So I do like the idea of, I feel like athletic, picturesque, and livery makes us think that we have quite a sort of lofty position. But we're envious, so maybe we're despite being in quite a lofty position originally, I'm assuming it's all gone bad since we became an explorer. Despite having that lofty position, we were envious of somebody, and that somehow got us into trouble. So we got blackmailed. So yeah. And then finally the backgrounds. So it's D66. Beautiful. And our D66 background is 25. Lamplighter. That's a very that feels like it could come straight from Into the Odd or Electric Bastionland. So we were a lamplighter. No. Why am I rolling D66? This is why you read the rulebook, people. Before your character became an explorer, they had a previous career. Why they left is up to you. First digit is your HP, the second is your starting money. So let's look at this properly. We are not a lamplighter. We had 5 HP and 2 coins, so that is 52. We were a carpenter. So I think we were like carpenter to some like noble or king or whatever. So finally, we have a starter package table, the classic. So our HP was 5, and our highest score was 15. So we're at the bottom of the table, which is rarely good. So we have a sword, and we owe 100 coins to the king. So this kind of ties into our like carpenter to the king. So all we have is a sword. So we owe money to the king. Cool, and I think that's it. We've got a character. Zeke Brown, failed carpenter to the king, who now owes the king a load of money. But we're hopeful. So that is our Lilliputian character. So let's flick through the rest, because there's some really, really interesting stuff towards the end of this. Book. Advancement is kind of similar to what you would get in Into the Odd. We have will damage, which is nice actually. This is something that when I was looking at putting stuff into the remastered version of Into the Odd, I almost put in something to use will a bit more, because you know how I feel about will as a stat, and why I changed it for charisma in Into the Odd, in Electric Bastion Land. And I'm tinkering around with another system that I'm playtesting currently, and for that I'm using charisma, or maybe I really want to rename it again just to continue the pattern. But willpower I still don't love, and I think having it be something that gets burnt through like this is a good way to kind of put it to use. So I thought about putting that into the remaster, but now it sort of fell by the wayside of something that I didn't want to change the game too much at its core. Okay, and we have these stress outcomes. Which happen when you take damage to your will. Okay, cool. So it's kind of a stress system, essentially. And Battle Hardened is the version of Scars, where when you get taken to exactly 0, something happens. And some of these are the same as Electric Bastion, and some of them are different. So, one of the things that these games often add in, Mouse Ritter was kind of the one that was famous for it. Not Maze Rat, sorry, Knave was a big influence on this, I believe, in terms of its origins. This idea of inventory system, having like an inventory system with this, an inventory system that's not quite a mini game, but like a little slot-based system, and using that for conditions as well as items. Now, this is something I might talk about on another string, so I don't want to hijack it too much today. In fact, I'll talk about it a little bit when we get onto Runecairn. But what I like about the RPG design scene is that I've since seeing this idea, I've kind of taken it back, and I am now experimenting with something similar myself. I'm not having like a sheet with slots as such, but I am experimenting with this idea of, I mean, we had bulky items in Electric Bastion and in Into the Odd, but I'm experimenting with having kind of conditions that work in the same way as that, called burdens. So I love the kind of the feedback of like these ideas come from Into the Odd, and then they go out into the wild, and then grow new ideas that I can steal for myself. I like that a lot. Magic. I've not read the magic section yet, so I will do it very quickly now. I have read the magic section. As soon as I saw it, I knew. So you have talismans, which are kind of like the way that Arcana would work in Into the Odd. Scrolls contain a single spell and take up a slot. They're like the spell tablets from Mouse Ritter and spell books in Cairn. So again, he's kind of like pulled from both, which is kind of cool. And then you have like a roll to cast the spell, and it's kind of like a spell dice system, similar to what you get in like the Glog games. We've got some examples. We have got a whole system about ships, upgrading your ship. I like this a lot. It feels very kind of... feels like this gives the game a lot of identity, because I feel like a lot of the game, I feel like if I was running it, a lot of it would be based around the ship and improving your ship and making the ship like a character in the party almost. We have retainers and crews, as you would expect. Running a trading company, which is essentially, it looks like it's the enterprise rules from Into the Odd. And armadas. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if I've ever used a mass battle system in a role-playing game, despite including them in Into the Odd and Electric Bastion. I don't know if I've ever really used them. Maybe like one detachment against another, or a detachment against a few individuals. I've never had like a big battle. The idea of having a naval battle with armadas does sound kind of cool. But again, is that something I'm ever going to do? But I like that it exists. We have reaction rolls, critical damage, and so on. And then here is something that I really like. It has a clear procedure for like naval exploration, because that is kind of the bread and butter of the game. I also really love this hex map, but it has a very straightforward system, and it's not from Into the Odd. It's not from Electric Bastion End. It appears to be its own thing, but it's very simple. Upon reading it, I was like, I could probably do this like after one read, and yeah, very happy with that. A solo, is this something that I know with board games it's become almost like, I've heard like board game people kind of not quite complaining, but saying that now it's like every game feels like it needs to include a solo mode, even if it's not suitable. And with board games, I think a big part of that reason is so that it can say on the box, rather than saying plays 3 to 5 players, it would say plays 1 to 5 players, and then it's got like a solo mode and like a weird 2-player mode, and then 3 to 5 is the main game. RPGs don't have that same pressure, because an RPG tends to not say like how many players it's suitable for. But I'm interested, and I mean this in a positive way, I'm interested to see so many games having like a little solo section on there. Oh, and Spark tables. Nice. Right, this is the Game Master section, so everyone else get lost. We've got some best practices. This will all be familiar to people who've read Cairn and Into the Odd, but it's always good to have. We have a system for generating a random part of the sea, which again is very straightforward. It's not the same procedure as those mapping ones in Electric Bastion, but it has a similar kind of feel, in that I suspect it was a similar sort of goal, where it's like, it's designed to make it very simple for people to get stuff on the paper, rather than thinking I couldn't possibly plan a whole game. It just gets you started, and then that's often the kick that people need to feel like they can be creative. Lots of tables, lots of generators. I like the die drop, not die drop, I can't remember what they're called. The Kevin Crawford tables, where you roll a d4, d6, d8, d10, d12. We can do that. We can roll a random island. Do you want a random island culture? You know what? We'll do the same roll, and then we'll look at what we get for each. So I rolled 3, 5, 8, 3, 7. So it's a sparse settlement on this island. It's a desert island. So desert island with a sparse settlement. The weather is an extreme storm cell, so people are going to be exhausted just for being here. So it's like an island that's like, I guess, under like under a sandstorm constantly, and there's this one sparse settlement there. What landmarks do we have? We have a winding, long forgotten road. So there's like a road winding through the sandstorm, and ecology, unnaturally large fungi. So desert fungus, desert sandstorm island. Sounds pretty cool. And then this, so we had to roll a culture. So what's the culture like? They have a modest village. Their government is a confederacy. Structure and architecture. Cyclopean edifices of prior civilization. So they live, it's a modest village, but they live within the edifices of like the old civilization here. So they live like within the ruins almost. Their cultural focus is art and expression. So they're like I don't want to say squatters, but yeah, kind of. But confederacy is, I'll be honest, I do know what confederacy means, but I don't know how to sort of gamify the idea of a confederacy that much. It doesn't leap out at me. And the settlement ruler is an enlightened child prodigy. So yeah, it's a child prodigy leading this group of artists that live in these kind of old ruins of this prior civilization on this horrible sandstorm island. We have a faction system with very kind of straightforward faction goals that are just kind of checked off. I like that a lot. We have a dungeon generator. That's pretty cool. There's just a lot of stuff here. Like it's 68 pages, but I feel like it crams in a lot of stuff. Like if someone picked this up as their first game, they didn't already own Into the Odd, Cairn, Mouse Ritter, they picked this up, I feel like it would get somebody excited to run this game. It would feel like they could jump into it. We've got some creatures, we've got some random creature thing generators, some examples, and then we have a sample adventure as well on top of all that stuff. So I'm going to speed through this a little bit because I want to give a fair amount of time to Runecairn as well. But we essentially have a sample adventure ready to go with all these locations. I'll skip through them because I don't want to give too much away. But there's dungeons, there's caves, there's a ship. Oh, what I really like is, I really like this little section. I like that it acknowledges these 3 other games that you can use this book with. So many times people say, oh, well, I'll buy this book, but I'll just use it to hack stuff into another game that I'm making. But not many games will actually help you out with that. Sometimes they'll include sort of conversion guides for 1 game or maybe 2 systems. But here we've got 3 systems, and it explains not just rules things, but more just like how do you make it work with the setting? How can you sort of tie these 2 settings together? There we go. So that is Lilliputian Adventures on the Open Seas by Matthew Morris. So I will take a very small intermission, just a minute to top up my drink, and then I'll be back to talk about Runecairn. That is not the intermission button. This is exciting now. Where is the intermission button? There we go. This is the intermission. It's a very professional operation here. Now, we can be honest with each other, can't we? Because that intermission was not just to get a drink. It was because I could feel my back seizing up because I am officially an old man and I apparently cannot sit. I can sit all day long, but something about sitting on stream, I think I sit slightly awkwardly. And within like 30 minutes, I just need to stand up and like bend and creak, and nobody needs to see that. Maybe we'll start doing like an old man yoga intermission in the middle, but we're not quite there yet. So we are back on Runecairn, no less, not that page. I did tell people about the heat, didn't I? I said that the heat had destroyed me, and apparently it's removed my ability to control the stream today. Runecairn is a game by Odin's Beard RPG, aka Colin Lesseur. I said that I mentioned it not being a Mark of the Odd game, and it's not. It does acknowledge Into the Odd, but it is primarily based on Cairn. And I believe it's probably fair to say there is some Mouse Ritter in there as well. So the idea of Runecairn, it's really fascinating looking at this alongside Lilliputian, because they really feel like two games you could just get like in a compendium. I feel like with like Cairn, Runecairn, Lilliputian, Mouse Ritter, I feel like there's a big box set waiting to happen of like Into the Odd descended games, if you like. But this one, as you might expect from the name, this one is based on kind of Norse mythology, kind of Saga of the Icelanders type stuff, and it's absolutely dripping in theme, which is what I love, and a disgusting turn of phrase, but we'll move on. So I mentioned that it was inspired by Norse mythology, but it is also, I think it's fair to say, highly inspired by Dark Souls and the Souls-like games. It's like those two things shoved together. Again, we start with philosophies and principles, which are very kind of, in this kind of game, seem to be like the standard way to start. But there are a few kind of key differences once you get to the actual mechanics. So, one thing that I love is that as well as having principles for players and for the warden, you have principles of the world, which is like the setting explained in these kind of 3 bullet points, except for these two, 3 bullet point lists, which, surprise, surprise, I'm a big fan of that sort of thing. And it really gets you started very quickly into the setting. So we have a few key differences here compared to Cairn and Lilliput. This sort of diverges a little bit more in terms of mechanics. I'm not going to go over every tiny little change, but I'm going to pick out a few that are particularly interesting. So you have some different ability scores, which you might think is a big thing, but it's really not. Like the fact that you've got 4 instead of 3 is what it is. But then you have, instead of having HP, you have resilience, essentially. But resilience is made up of vigor and vitality added together. Vigor is like how many times can you die and come back before you become a shade. And vitality is kind of a more traditional kind of, I believe it's used for like poisons and things like that, but it's a more traditional kind of like life force and health. And then you add them together and that gives you your resilience, which is your HP. And that's what you're sort of losing in combat. And when you run out, it goes onto your strength, and that's sort of your classic Into the Odd HP. And then straight into the classes, of which there are 4, I believe. Yeah, 4 in this game. And you'll see straight away, you got a few terminology changes, like you got defense instead of armor, which kind of makes sense. I've mulled over that idea myself. If I had my time again, it may be called defense, but now that it's armor, I'm probably sticking with armor. And then you have these things called, well, you have key items, but the interesting thing is you have skills that you can use that are tied to your items, and these are combat skills. And this is where the kind of like, just to get my, I'm going to say a phrase that's going to get my, I'm going to hit the YouTube algorithm with this, so bear with me. Souls-like combat. This is where you get your Souls-like combat, because you can block, you can parry, and I think dodge is somewhere else. Dodge is like a standard one, or evade, I forget what it's called. But essentially, in short, you have these things you can do in combat that are special actions, usually tied to your weapon or your shield. But there are some generic ones as well. And the way they work is, if you're familiar with Into the Odd, so let's say, let's use this disarm skill here, which is tied to your axe. Essentially, you can use this, and your target has to make a dexterity save or else they're disarmed. But it gives you a fatigue, which if you've played Mouse Ritter or Cairn, you'll know is like an item that goes into... It's not an item, but it goes into an item slot and sits there and takes up space. And potentially you don't want to run out of space because it's a bad time if you do in your inventory. And there are all sorts of these things. So thrust, you can do a special lunge where you strike targets that's 10 feet away, and that gives you fatigue. And it adds this nice little crunchy kind of tactical combat system onto the chassis of like Cairn or Into the Odd. Now, you might think this is the kind of thing that I don't like, and I would not put this Into the Odd or Electric Bastion because those are not games really about fighting. But this is a game with warriors, and it's Norse myth, and there's lots. It's meant to be a bit more of a gritty kind of violent game, and it's got that Dark Souls element too. So here I think it fits beautifully, and it's just I haven't tested this out yet, but it feels like it's just enough to give it that feel of you're making these combat decisions about what to do without it just turning into something like it doesn't just turn into a mini game of like chess or Final Fantasy Tactics. Again, that's great for a different game, but here it still keeps you immersed in the game and what your character is doing, but it gives you just those few extra little crunchy decisions to make. So I'm a big fan. There can also be kind of spell-like abilities that you can do that will give you a fatigue. You can rip through people's armor. So dash, there you go. That's kind of the dodge one. So you can do reactions as well. Some of these are reactions. I missed one of the more interesting ones actually. Block. So if you have a shield and the enemy is attacking you, you can use a reaction with your shield. And if you pass a strength save, you avoid all physical damage, but you take a fatigue. Or you can parry, which is similar, but you can retaliate, and that there's worse. It's worse if you fail. So you've got the warrior has like decisions to make with their shield. It's not just do I hold it up or do I block. It's do I just passively receive benefits from it? Do I parry or do I block? It's good stuff. And they're still nice and simple characters. It might not. It might look like it's a lot of stuff being added from the Into the Odd chassis, but I have a low tolerance for this kind of thing. And after reading it through, I felt like I understood it pretty clearly straight away. You've got your mead, which is kind of like your Estus flasks, so you can drink them to recover some of your fatigues. And yeah, it feels like a very kind of authentic kind of Dark Souls kind of vibe. I know there was so much conversation about a Dark Souls RPG recently when the official one came out, but this feels like it would do a really good job if you were after that kind of mood, and not just the mood. Like when people talk about Dark Souls RPGs, I always worry people are overemphasizing the mechanics. I always think, are they thinking a game has to have the specific Dark Souls, like a checklist of things? Like, oh, well, you've got to be able to roll. You've got to be able to dodge roll, and you've got to be able to parry, and there's got to be all these different weapon, what are they called? Like elemental weapon damage type things. It's like, well, do you? Is that what people really? Is that the core of Dark Souls? And I think this game taps into a lot of the core of Dark Souls, to me, as somebody who's not gone especially deep into any of the games. So we have a few more status effects. We have resting at bonfires. We have souls that you collect, which are kind of like XP and currency that you can spend. And you even got the whole thing about when you die, you can go back and collect your souls. So it's not. This isn't just like Dark Souls inspired, like they wanted to get a few more thousand on Kickstarter. This is Dark Souls inspired, and they've gone quite hard on it. Like, there are very specific big elements of Dark Souls that are in here. And it seems obvious to say this about a game that's about, you know, that's drawing from Dark Souls, but I like a game that just says straight up, like, you can die a few times, it's fine. So then we have equipment, and equipment is kind of, like I say, it does have its damage and range and stuff like that as normal, but it's kind of defined by these equipment skills. So if you have, let's say we wanted to have a longbow, an elm longbow. We do D8 damage, and here it says volley D8. So volley is fire 2 arrows without hesitation, roll damage twice, but it causes you fatigue. And a dire strike is what happens when you roll maximum. So if you roll maximum on those dice, you can fire another arrow. Now, I'm going to make a confession here. I have pretty much entirely stolen that dire strike mechanic because I do like it a lot. I have messed around with like weapons and stuff into the odd that trigger something on a certain roll. So if you had like a D8 sword, and you could say, well, on a 6+ it does this extra thing. Like I've done that before, but I'm messing around with this idea of not quite critical hits, but giving something special when you roll the maximum. And again, I would not put that in every version of Into the Odd or Electric Bastion, but the thing I'm working on is a little bit more overtly combat-y at times. So I want there to be that little bit more granularity of these big narrative moments that can happen in combat when someone rolls a high score. So there we go. Other than what I've kind of mentioned, most of combat is the same. You've got the multiple attackers roll from Electric Bastion, so they clearly have excellent taste. You have like advantage and disadvantage, I should say, on the damage roll rather than on there's no rolling to hit, but you can have advantage and disadvantage on the damage roll. And then you have omens, which are the scar equivalent. So if you get taken to exactly 0 HP, you get the omen. So let's say you roll 4. A ghostly figure emerges from the wilderness and shrieks before fading away. Make a strength save. If you fail, you lose most of your hearing until the next day. I like that. That's quite bonkers. I like, again, it's just more like setting stuff, and it makes the world feel magical, and it ties in with all this death stuff, like the idea that there's a lot of, I'm gonna say there's a lot of things based around death, which sounds obvious, but there is, and it's really cool. I like it a lot. I've got an example of combat. Magic is, again, kind of similar to what we've seen in some of the other ones, where you have items with charges. Does it have recharge, I think? No, that they might cause a fatigue. Sorry, I read these two so close together. I like parts of them have like blurred together in my head. They take up slots, so that it's similar to how they work in Mouse Ritter. And I like these rings give you like a passive bonus, but also a passive bad thing. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot. We've got spells. We've got monsters. I like that Elf is one of the first monsters that you see. Lindworm, always good to see, this guy. I like that he just swallows the target on a dire strike. So he might just swallow you, round one. I've been, like I say, the thing I've been working on, this Primeval Bastionland thing, I've been making the monsters in there a little bit more. I've talked the talk on this for a long time, where I've said you should make your monsters just do the thing. Don't give them a save, or rather, don't give the characters a save. Have the monster do the thing, and then the players have to react to it afterwards. So you don't roll to avoid getting swallowed whole. this thing's going to swallow you whole, and then you've got to deal with it. So I'm experimenting with going a bit more to the extreme on that, where stuff just happens and then you have to respond to it, and it does rely on telegraphing. I'm using that slow mechanic that I posted about, where the players will get a chance to respond, but they if they don't take action to avoid it, they won't get a save. But I do also like it just happening on a dire strike. That's pretty cool. And then we have our appendix with names, traits, an Icelandic pronunciation guide, which is much appreciated. Character sheet, and that's it. So that is Runecairn. I absolutely love this game. It has been, and I'm not just saying this. Like I say, I bought this. I didn't get sent this. I bought this quite a while ago before I started doing the streams again. And this is one of the games that made me want to come back to doing these streams, because I just really wanted to talk about it and sort of highlight it. A lot of people already know about it. It's been around for a little while now, but I wanted to give it a bit of a shout out and say, just acknowledge that this is one of the games that I've read, and I immediately wanted to take things from it. It really inspired me to change the way that I was working on the games that I was working on. And I love a game that does that. I love a game that gets you excited about that sort of thing. So that's Runecairn by Odin's Beard RPG, Colin Lasser. Check it out. And as always, thank you for watching. You can find both these games. They're both on itch.io, Runecairn and Lilliputian Adventures. You can find out more about all my stuff at bastionland.com, and if you want to support these streams and the blog posts, you can go to patreon.com/bastionland. You also get a backstage video each month, and you get a early access to the blog post as well. If you want to stay in touch, the best place to do that is to go to the Bastionland Discord server, which is linked from the sidebar on bastionland.com. And next week, I'll be back to talk about something else. I'm between two things, and I don't want to promise either one of them yet. But there will be a stream next week, same time. And until then, it's goodbye for now.